We're back on the early edge. We're talking NFL draft with Dave, otherwise known as Uncle Dave, which is weird, Dave, because we're basically the same age, and yet I still call you Uncle Dave. Kind of weird. Mike Renner is joining us as well. Let's talk about, we've got a lot of receivers, a lot of pass catchers. Dave, this is kind of your wheelhouse because we're kind of talking guys that might impact fantasy football next year.
Sure. Let's
start with Emeka Egbuka. When we look at his betting line in terms of draft position, Dave, I'll start with you. It's 28.5. The over is plus 130. The under, pretty juicy, but I still kind of like it at minus 160. What do you?
I like the over. I think getting plus 130 on Egbuka, who, let's face it, he's probably the safest receiver prospect in the draft class. He's just not sexy. You watch him play, and he shows some speed in flashes. It's not consistent. His route running is great. He will adapt to the NFL game very quickly, but he might do it as a slot receiver, and he might do it for 10 years. That's solid. That's really, really good, but I don't know if that's something that an NFL team is going to prioritize, especially in a year where there's limited options on the offensive line, little bit limited options as far as pass rush goes. It's deep at defensive tackle, but to get the quality, you're going to have to spend a pick in the first round. And so Egbuka is somebody that I look at maybe a late first round pick. This is right around where I think he'll go. It also wouldn't surprise me if he goes in the mid 30s. So I'm going to take the over on that. And at plus 130, I like the odds.
I kind of like the under on this one. It's not great odds, but I think just given his profile, given what kind of draft class this is, I see him going earlier than this. I think, 18 to Seattle is not too high, 20 to Denver, 21 to Pittsburgh, all likely landing spots, or even 28 to Detroit, which is right before this if their trade rumors for Jameson Williams are true, because he is the best character in this receiver class. He is the highest floor, and it's a draft where there's not a lot of swings of the fences. There's not a lot of guys who have high-end potential. Why not just take a nice double? Why not just take a guy who you know is going to be a great slot receiver, great locker room presence, NFL ready? I think a lot of well-run franchises are just going to say, that's a guy I want in my receiver room.
I think another guy who fits that bill is probably Tyler Warren. I just think the publicity that he's been getting, I shouldn't say publicity, but just I've heard so many things, and I think a lot of it is positive in pushing his draft position now. We've got an over-under now at BetMGM of 10.5. Mike, I'm going to start with you on this one. The over 10.5 is plus 130. The under, basically similar odds as Egbuka, is minus 165. Where do you stand on this one?
I think it's going under, but I don't really love the value. I probably get better value on Colson Loveland, who I think both go very highly. I think they're both off the board by pick 15. I think these tight ends, again, when you're looking and evaluating this draft class and just position by position, they are special for their respective positions. Not every year has a tight end the caliber of these guys, and Tyler Warren specifically, with his versatility and ability to wear a bunch of different hats, to throw, to run it out of the backfield. I think teams like the Jets at 7, the Saints at 9, and the Bears at 10 are all going to be vying for this guy. Would surprise me if he slips anywhere past the Bears.
I agree. And you asked earlier about difference makers at running back, Sia. I remember all the way back to last year's draft when Brock Bowers was taken. And I think a lot of teams that passed on Brock Bowers or passed on the opportunity to trade ahead of the Raiders and take Brock Bowers are lamenting it. And now here's an opportunity to get somebody who's not quite the same as Brock Bowers, but certainly just as physical. The difference this year compared to last year is that Colson Loveland might be higher on some teams' draft boards than Tyler Warren. It's not a slam dunk that Warren is the consensus number 1 tight end in this draft class. So there's a chance that one of those teams that Mike just mentioned likes Loveland more than Warren. It really just depends on the type of offense you run and what you want your tight end to do in that offense. If you want your tight end to be more of a receiver than a blocker, then Loveland might be your guy. So I'll take the over on this. It's at plus 130. I prefer the over on Egbuka than I do to Warren, but I do think that there's a little bit of value there.
All right, let's move to quarterback. Let's go to Jaxson Dart, who we haven't talked a lot about yet. His over-under is 24.5. The over is plus 120. I got to say, that's kind of where I lean. The under, minus 150, maybe the third, maybe the fourth, maybe the second quarterback drafted. I don't know, but I like this over on 24.5. Mike Renner, what say you?
Yeah, I'm going over here as well, especially if they're giving you plus 120 to take it. There's one team that would take him under, right? I think it's the Pittsburgh Steelers is the only one who would be willing to pull the trigger on him. And, they just might not have that high a grade on. We just don't know what their thoughts are. They might even go, sure, Sanders, or look elsewhere later in the draft. So when it's just one team and pretty much everyone else would be behind this number, I like going over.
Might I play devil's advocate for a second, gentlemen? It was about this time last year when we weren't sure where Bo Nix or Michael Penix would go in the NFL draft. I remember some scouts telling me that Michael Penix was no better than a third-round pick. That just didn't sound right at the time. And now look at where they went. There is such a push for quarterback help in this league. There are a lot of teams that need it. Look around this league. There's like 5 teams. Pittsburgh's starting quarterback right now is Mason Rudolph. They're picking 21st. If Ward's gone at 1 and Shedeur Sanders goes before they pick, this might be the quarterback that they settle on, and they might be forced into taking him at 21st. I see this number at plus 120, and I see 24.5, and the knee-jerk reaction is to take the over, and that's how we all feel. And it makes me nervous, and Sia, you know this from all the stuff we've done on Early Edge, that it feels like a trap. And they want you to take the plus 120. So I'm steering clear of this. I don't want to take Jaxson Dart either way. I like Dart as a prospect, but even I would rather take the over if I had to, but it just seems like something that the odds makers want you to do. I don't want to do that. I don't want to fall into their trap.
Dave, all I heard was you sully the good name of Mason Rudolph, and I don't appreciate it. Let's move on. I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself, Dave. Tet McMillan, first wide receiver drafted. It's minus 175. Super juicy. Does feel like maybe the number 1 wide receiver prospect. Are you touching this one?
No, I don't bet anything with juice this high. It just doesn't make sense for me to, unless it's like if Cam Ward's odds were to drop to 175, sure, I'll take that, but they're not dropping for no reason if they ever were. This isn't worth it for Tet McMillan, and I've even seen it at minus 145. I don't even think that that's necessarily worth it, but I don't know which wide receiver would go ahead of him. You can make the case for Egbuka because he's a high floor receiver, like Mike said. You can make the case for Matthew Golden because he's got speed on his side, seems to be an emerging player, but Tet McMillan's an emerging player too. Will he be the first wide receiver off the board, not including Travis Hunter? Yeah, I think it probably will happen, but I'd rather take it. If I'm going to take it at all, let's get that juice down a little bit. Let's only fill the glass half full. If you can get it at minus 130, I would take it.
Yeah, I would just bet this in other ways. I think he's going to be the first receiver off the board, but there's a chance he's not. But I would bet it like last week on Friday, we said we had plus 400 to go him going top 10. I would bet it that way. Or just have him going to the Cowboys, who are probably the only team outside of the top 10 that would be willing to take him early on and make him, the first wide receiver off the board. So I wouldn't touch this one at just minus 175.